Thank you, Kate. I think you pulled it off. You made stats interesting, important, relevant, and maybe next time that presentation may be a bit less defensive because you've got a very important story to tell. I'm desperate to prove Barry wrong by showing we have got time for questions. We only have a couple of minutes, though. We did start late. The moderator of the next session is a good friend, is also Italian, so he probably assumes the next session will start late anyway, so I won't be too apologetic. That's terribly a silly remark to make. Any questions from the audience or comments, as long as they are brief? If so, yeah, please, sir. Could you give your name, sir, and your
Yes, my name's John, that's easy, and I work for public computing. So I'm in this field. I've got one question for all the speakers, please. I almost felt like crying for our poor relations, the profit sector, the business sector. And my question is, how does this fantastic social movement begin to engage with the institutions that we have now? We're not just fighting brigades, I just picked one word that was used. We're here to work together for change, but you have to work with what exists now. Comments, please.
Thank you, John. That's a very good question. We haven't got volunteer to give an answer. Stefan.
Getting used to the technology here. I think it's a great question. It's something that we are, I think, increasingly working with the private sector at Ashoka. One thing that's been interesting for me at Changemakers is that we're almost we work with these partners on the context of these engagements, these challenges, and on the one hand, it's in some ways service delivery. We're helping a company or a foundation achieve their own social impact goals in a particular thematic area. But we're also a nonprofit with a mission, so we bring our own lens. And so the real trick for us is not to, we have plenty of opportunities to work with the private sector. The real trick is how to strike the right balance where we're providing effective services, something tangible that they can relate to, and at the same time bring our own mission, our own lens for social impact.
Quick comment from Chris.
There's a really good example in the Black Country of collaboration between business and the social sector. So there's an aerospace business. It makes parts for most of the planes that are in the sky, Timken, and they provided space and funding and have incubated a whole range of businesses, not due to simply CSR, because a lot of organisations kind of claim that, but a real collaborative venture where they're supporting social economic outcomes, and it's a terrific example. So I don't think it's all bad, but it's incredibly variable out there.
Thank you, Chris. Any more questions before I wrap up? Yes, madam, in the very back row. Please give your name and organisation.
Can you hear? Okay. Tatiana Panteli, University of Wolverhampton. Many speakers were talking about citizens' engagement and open data, which comes together with this engagement because, of course, we want to keep this information open and get this across to many people. Did you come across any security issues? Because, of course, many of our citizens are fantastic people, but for example, Chris mentioned that some of them engaging in the justice system and so on. So did you face any challenges in that?
Who's that question for, please?
I think it would be to Chris maybe and Alan as well, because they have open access.
Okay, thank you. Alan, you go first.
Certainly. Yeah, security is always an issue that we deal with from a technical perspective at the very least. All sorts of government data has different levels of sensitivity, whether that's enrollment data for children in schools, or whether that's crime data, or that is data for people moving through the criminal justice system. So I think that it's always a delicate balance, it's always nuanced, and it's always something that you want to treat from a technical perspective. And just a really good example that you can look to online is the recent release of New York City's taxi cab data. They poorly encrypted the personal information of the taxi cab drivers, and so all of the anonymized data was decrypted, and personal information could be construed from there. But as a result, a big debate has ensued about, well, should we have even encrypted it in the first place? And I think that it's a case-by-case basis.
Quick comment. Thank you, Chris.
I mean, if you're in Wolverhampton, you'll know that in the UK there are major difficulties around sharing data, and I think it is a major issue that needs to be addressed, and we're far from sorting it out. I mean, just an example: the National Health Service in the UK have set up. I mean, there's an enormous amount of data that you can get from information in the system that will enable us to plan and understand the differences that we could make to individual lives and health outcomes. But we can't share. Even different organisations within the NHS, the same organisation cannot share data at the moment. They can share some anonymised data, but we need to get beyond that issue. I agree, it's a major obstacle to making better use of big data.
Thank you, Chris. We have to stop now, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry. I've been asked to sum up briefly on something I don't normally do, but I will on this occasion, in the sense of trying to sort of refer back to some of the common themes, concepts, words, phrases used by all the panelists. And it seems maybe obvious, but let's just remind ourselves, well, my takeaway anyway. We're talking about collaboration, we're talking about partnership, social networks, neo-pluralism, as Robert said, belonging to multiple groups, integration, interconnection, the blurring of the public-private divide, the power of individuals rather than groups, whilst at the same time having a commitment to the community, change, not any kind of change, systemic change, the power of peers. But that's not very useful unless there is the building of trust that many speakers have been talking about. We have to build trust not just between ourselves, but with the people we're trying to influence. And that goes back to John's question from the floor, is that it's all very well to do all these wonderful things, but unless people are not willing, people on the other side, however you define the other side, are unwilling to take us on and be open to our ideas, then we're not going to get very far. So the challenge, obviously, for all of us who are interested in social innovation in its broadest manifestation is to find ways to not just to connect, but also convince these other people who are, to be fair, probably quite open to the idea, but need to have arguments made to them. And alas, kind of personal comment from me, rather than based on what my takeaway from the panel is, that some of you in the room who are maybe not familiar with the EU process or the European Commission as much as people like I am who follow it every day in a very tedious way sometimes, but you may think of the European Commission as a kind of just a place which makes regulation, which dispenses funds through the Horizon 2020 program, etc. But I think it's also a potential innovator in its own right. And if I may say, DG Connect, through the leadership of Robert, Madeleine, and his Commissioner, Nelly Cruz, are pioneers in this area. And I think they will do even more for this broad cause if people like you in the room who are equally committed show your appreciation and your commitment to working more with DG Connect. So DG Connect is not seen as some kind of maverick outpost inside the European Commission, but what they're trying to do in a very, very, in my view, impressive and pioneering way becomes not just like a pilot project, but becomes mainstream within the whole European Union apparatus. With those words, we bring to a close. Can I ask you please one final round of applause for our very, very, very impressive panel. Thank you. I now cede the chairmanship to Philip Adari.